Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana Yashodanandana Braja Yamuna Tira Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So today we'll discuss Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 7, texts 27, 28, 29. I had a couple of ideas, but I think I just want to address these three verses, and then I would probably want to tell a couple of recount a couple of Prabhupada stories, but I also want to leave room for time for anybody else to share, because this is a big one. 125th anniversary is kind of the same month. So I want to do that and end on time at the same time, although I didn't jinx it by saying that. So text 27. Tiryam Manusha Devanam Tiryan Manusha Devanam Sarisrupa Patatrinam Sarisrupa Patatin. Okay. Sarisrupa Patatrinam. Vada Na Sarga Samvyuham Varana Sarga Samvyuham Garbha Sveda Vijobhidam Garbha Sveda Vijobhidam Tiryan Manusha Devanam Sarisrupa Patatrinam Varanasarga Samvyuham Garbhasveda Vijobhidam Tiryan Manusha Devanam Sarisrupa Patatrinam Varanasarga Samvyuham Garbhasveda Vijobhidam
Tiryam Manusha Devanam Sarisrupa Patatrinam Varanasarga Samvyuham Garbhasveda Vijobhidam
Yan Manusha Devanam Sarisrupa Patatrinam Vadanaha Sarga Samvyuham Garbhasveda Vijobhidam
Tiryam Manusha Devanam Sarisrupa Patatrinam Varana Sarga Samgyuham
Vidiraha Sargasamgyuham
Varvasveda Vijogidam
Varvasvira Vijogiham.
Synonyms. Tirya,
Tirya,
subhuman.
subhuman.
Manusha,
Manusha,
human beings.
human beings.
Devanam,
Devanam,
of the superhuman beings or demigods.
Of the superhuman demigods.
Sarisrupa,
Sarisrupa,
reptiles.
reptiles.
Patatrinam,
Patatrinam,
of the birds.
of the birds.
Vada,
Vada,
kindly describe.
kindly described.
Na,
Nah,
unto me.
unto thee.
Sarga,
Sarga,
generation.
Generation.
Oh. Samdyuham,
Samgyuham,
specific divisions.
specific divisions.
Garbha,
Garbha,
embryonic.
embryonic.
Sveda,
Sveda,
perspiration.
perspiration.
Dvija,
Vija,
Cha,
twice born.
twice born.
Ubhidam,
Udam,
of the planets, etc.
of the planets, etc.
Translation. Also, please describe the living beings under different classifications. Subhumans, humans, those born of the embryo, those born of perspiration, those who are twice born, birds, and the plants and vegetables. Kindly describe their generations and subdivisions also. Responsibly, please. Also, please describe the living beings
Also, please describe the living beings
under different classifications.
under different classifications.
Subhumans,
Subhumans,
humans,
humans,
those born of the embryo,
those born of the embryo,
those born of perspiration,
those born of perspiration,
those who are twice born,
those who are twice born,
birds,
birds,
and the plants and vegetables.
and the plants and vegetables.
Kindly describe their generations and subdivisions also.
Kindly describe the generations and subdivisions also.
There's no report here. So we'll go on to the next text. Oops. Text 28. Gunavataira Vishvasya Sagastityapyayashrayam Surajita Srinivasasya Vyachakshvodara Vikramam. Please also describe the incarnations of the material modes of nature, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshvara. And please describe the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his magnanimous activities. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Although Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshvara, the three incarnations of the material modes of nature, are the principal deities for creation, maintenance, and destruction of the cosmic manifestation, they are not the final authority. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is the ultimate goal, the cause of all causes. He is the ashraya, or final rest of everything. And 29. Varnashrama vibhaganscha rupashila swabhavataha rishinam janma karmani vedasya cha vikarshanam. O great sage, kindly describe the divisions and orders of human society in terms of symptoms, behavior, and the characteristics of mental equilibrium and sense control. Also, please describe the births of the great sages and the categorical divisions of the Vedas. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The four statuses and orders of human society, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, as well as Brahmacharis, Grihastas, Vanaprasthas, and Sannyasis, are all divisions of quality, education, culture, and spiritual advancement attained by practicing control of the mind and senses. All these divisions are based on the particular nature of each individual person, not on the principle of birth. Birth is not mentioned in this verse because birth is immaterial. Vidura is famous in history as born of a Shudrani mother, yet he's more than a Brahmana by qualification because he is seen here to be the disciple of a great sage, Maitreya Muni. Unless one achieves at least the Brahminical qualifications, one cannot understand the Vedic hymns. Mahabharata is also a division of the Vedas, but it is meant for women, Shudras, and Vichapandus, the worthless children of the higher section. The less intelligent section of society can avail themselves of the Vedic instructions simply by studying the Mahabharata. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukhaṁ Karoti Vachalam Bhangum Langhayate Girim Jatkripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupakadamahim Dadati Swapadantikam Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhobhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Just read the translations of the verses. Also, please describe the living beings under different classifications: subhumans, humans, those born of the embryo, those born of perspiration, those who are twice born, birds, and plants and vegetables. Kindly describe their generations and subdivisions also. Please also describe the incarnations of the material modes of nature, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshvara. And please describe the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his magnanimous activities. Please also describe the expansions of different sacrifices and paths of mystic powers, analytical study of knowledge, and devotional service, all with their respective regulations. Nope, I'm sorry, I did not do a very good job of navigating this electronic text. Okay, the last verse actually is, O great sage, kindly describe the divisions and orders of human society in terms of symptoms, behavior, and the characteristics of mental equilibrium and sense control. Also, please describe the births of the great sages and the categorical divisions of the Vedas. So, in these three texts, we see a couple of things that might be of note. Attend to. One is that, one way of making sense of things, one way of organizing things is by taxonomy or classification. When I used to teach English, college English, in the first semester composition class that I taught for so many years, one of the projects would be using classification to make an argument, to make a point. There would be other strategies as well, definition and things like that. But one of them is classification, and it's really useful. Sometimes we get really carried away as human beings. There's a scholar that I studied when I was in graduate school and continued to read after, named Kenneth Burke, probably one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century that nobody's ever heard of, unless you've been to graduate school and you took some rhetoric classes or maybe sociology or something. He was quite influential in several fields, literary criticism. And he has a poem that he calls The Definition of Human. And, oh, I just forgot it, just slipped away. Well, one of the things that he pointed out, and all of a sudden his exact words escape me, although this is something that I memorized many years ago, is that we tend to overdo things. Oh, he says we're rotten with perfection. Rotten with perfection. Now, there's a couple of ways to read that. The way Burke intended it most was that whenever we get an idea, we just, just like we hear, nowadays we hear about the news echo chambers. People only listen to those people in the media who they think, I don't know, are most exciting, given the most dopamine rush or something or other when they read their stuff or hear their rants, whether it's from the left, right, or wherever. But they tend to live in this echo chamber of just one source of information. You get the same thing over and over again. It's like Krishna noticed that when she goes to her mom's house, all day long, it's a steady diet of CNN. If a few years ago you'd gone to visit my dad and his brother at the home they shared, it was a steady diet, got constant Fox News channel. And so this is what, people, it's a sort of feedback loop where they just kind of like, they just solidify whatever ideas that they have. And, they only listen to people who are going to confirm their ideas. They won't, and this is true regardless of your, however you identify yourself politically or socially or whatever. So rotten with perfection, that's part of it. But also, we just tend to overdo everything. We find a way of figuring things out. So we also get really attached to classification, to creating hierarchy. And there's even a sort of hierarchy in the spiritual world. If you read, let's say if you read the Ramananda Sambad in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 8 of the Matya Lila, where Lord Chaitanya keeps probing Ramananda Roy, his confidential associate, his new confidential associate, to tell him what, okay, please tell me what life's ultimate goal is, and please support whatever you say with scriptural references. So Ramananda goes through this whole hierarchy it makes Maslow's hierarchy of needs look simplistic. He goes through this whole hierarchy of all these different ways you might see what's the ultimate goal of life. Starting with, we see in the last of these verses reference to behaving properly according to your position in society, according to Varnashram Dharma. So he starts with that, and Lord Chaitanya just kind of shrugs it off. Says that's external to what I'm really after. Can you keep going? So he keeps prodding him and prodding him, and then he gets to sacrifice it. He says, okay, that's still kind of like external. Doesn't really have to do with the core of the matter. And then he gets to serving, actual devotional service, and he says, okay, I like that, but can you go? So now he's accepting, right? He says, oh, okay, that's nice. So what's next? Can you tell me more? And so then he talks about Sakya Rasa. And then Lord Chaitanya says, now we're talking. Now we're talking about specific ways to serve Krishna. And then so we go through Vatsalya Rasa, through Sakya Rasa, Vatsalya Rasa, and Madhura Rasa. And Ramananda makes the point very clearly that although from to the extent that it's possible, a sort of objective perspective, some of these are better, higher than others, mainly because of the intensity of the investment of love. Just like I was mentioning, whenever it was I spoke last, something about going through the Shikshastakam, and if you actually, especially when we're going through the English translation, you pay attention to the way the emotion builds over these 8 verses, and you get to the end and it's Radharani just completely lost her mind. Whatever. You guys can say whatever you like about him. Yeah, he is that, whatever it is. But whatever he is, I'm his, he's mine. That settles it. So, whatever he wants, that's cool with me. So, and it's a kind of madness, and when you read that in the last chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the discussion of it, you see this is like this is Lord Chaitanya having actually fulfilled his confidential reasons for coming, right? He had his external reasons to teach us Nam Sankirtan and to teach, ultimately, as he puts it in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Raga Nuga Bhakti, especially. The 4, he says, the Charibhava, the 4 kinds of love that with which the residents of Vrindavan serve Krishna. And, but then the inner idea, the inner purpose for Lord Krishna's appearing as Lord Chaitanya was to experience what it's like to love him. And so we see Shikshastakam, we kind of move through this. He talks about how wonderful the Nam Sankirtan is and how far he is from that, and just what's needed to, for us to really make progress, and what that progress starts to look like, and then he gets, to the last couple 3 verses, and it's just love, just kind of like madness of love. And you can actually trace the 9, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has explained how to read where the 9 different stages of bhakti show up in the Shikshastakam. So there's hierarchy, even in the spiritual world. But it's not a thing, because everything there is about Krishna. It's all about Krishna. They're all about Krishna. Even their love for each other is all focused on giving pleasure to Krishna. So anyway, so there's that whole taxonomy and hierarchy. I wanted to talk about that for a minute. Also, another thing to note in these verses, and the upcoming verses over the next at least couple days, depending on how ambitious folks seem. Oh, we'll be doing other things on Monday and Tuesday. But we see that Vidura is not just asking a couple of questions. This is not a narrow press conference kind of thing. And then I have a follow-up question. He has a catalog of questions. So many questions. I mean, this is what we've been reading for the last a couple of days, and then for a few more days onwards after the festival. So many questions. There's so many things to try to understand that help us develop our sambandha gyan, our knowledge of how to relate to Krishna. As I've mentioned before, out of Jiva Goswami's 6 Sandarbhas, his 6 essays explaining the philosophy of Srimad Bhagavatam based on the scriptures. The first four all have to do with this Sambandha again. The Tattva Sandarbha, Paramatma Sandarbha, Bhagavat Sandarbha, and Krishna Sandarbha. They all have to do with understanding in a progressively detailed way the nature of the Tattva Sandarbha starts out by establishing what is valid evidence when we're engaged in such a discussion. And his ultimate thing is really Srimad Bhagavatam. That's the ultimate Pramana, the ultimate form of evidence. And then in the Paramatma Sandarbha, the relationships among the Jiva, the Jiva Shakti, the Maya Shakti, and the Paramatma, which is a feature of the Lord, which expands for the benefit of the material world. And then in the Bhagavad Sandarbha, he progresses a little more and establishes that Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, is the ultimate object of knowledge and the ultimate object of devotion. And then he narrows it down, becomes more specific, and really Krishna, it's Krishna who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because this Paripasa Sutra that we see early in the Bhagavatam, Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam, that phrase, Jiva Goswami and the other acharyas call it Paripasa Sutra. This is the key to unlocking the mystery of Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam. Yes, there are all these other forms of God. And yes, God's here even in the material world, as we learn from the second canto. But ultimately, it's Krishna who is the Supreme Personality of God, who is the real, the personality who is able to reciprocate every kind of love in whatever quality and quantity that you might be able to offer it. So we see, as I mentioned before recently, at the very first word in his Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is Akhila Rasamrita Murti. This is a way of addressing Krishna as, well, Prabhupada calls it the reservoir of all pleasure. He can reciprocate every kind of love to whatever degree. And there just isn't any, he says, he makes the case in the Sandarbhas that there isn't anyone, especially in the Krishna Sandarbha, there isn't anyone who can reciprocate love in the way that Krishna can. And I've just mentioned our personal examples before. We're sometimes a little awkward in expressing our affection for each other, and we see how magical it is when we do that, when we actually do that. We just from our heart point out something to one of the other devotees that we really appreciate about their service, and that moves them. That heartfelt appreciation moves them so much. And this should be the core of conversations around the temple, not the other stuff. Kusha and I had an exchange the other day, and I think she shared a little bit of it in the group on WhatsApp. We were having an exchange about the need to create, to create and maintain a Vaikuntha atmosphere here at the temple. So the conversation should be focused on the kinds of relevant questions that Vidura is posing to Maitreya Muni, or that Parikshit poses to Shukadeva, or the sages of Naimisharanya to Sutta Goswami, or later in the 11th canto, Vasudeva poses to Narada Muni, and Narada Muni tells about when King Nimi encounters the 9 sons of Rishabdev, these great sages, the Nava-yogendras. Or on our appreciation of the service that the devotees do. And if we just pay attention, we see what the devotees are doing. We see how they're always moving. Stop for a rest here and there, a little conversation here and there, maybe go for a swim, grab a nap, catch a snack, go for a walk, something like that. But, you know, I see the devotee, and I do spend a lot of time kind of locked away in my little cave over there. But I get around the temple, and when I'm doing a lot of my services, I also see what other devotees are doing. We should be paying attention to that. This is something that a lot of us learned about parenting and about teaching, although I didn't always practice it very well with my Gurukula students, is to catch your kids doing stuff right and call them out on it. Right? Because we've got to catch them doing stuff wrong. If they're climbing up on the kitchen counter, reaching up on top of the cabinet to get the cookie jar, there's all kinds of disaster there. The kid could fall, the cookie jar could fall. Worst of all, the cookies could spill all over the floor. So as parents, we tend to focus so much on what the devotees, what our kids might do wrong, and to catch them at it, and point it out, and warn them away from it, punish them if necessary. It wasn't a big feature in our house. Fortunately, there wasn't that big call for it with our kids. We were just lucky. But sometimes, you know, I mean, I had ashrams full of rambunctious boys here, boys who were 5 to 10. When I was in California, boys who were, I think, 9, 10, and 11. 9, 10, and 11. I remember being 10. That's like second adolescence, right? The first adolescence is the terrible twos when you're 10. You really start thinking, you really identify so much more with your friends than your parents. And my friends weren't always the best people to identify with. We got into a lot of trouble, especially at that age, 9, 10, 11 years old, 12. Whew. But, so, you know, we focus on that, but if we focus on catching, you know, this is one of the pieces of advice that I remember reading in these books that we used for parenting back in the late 70s, early 80s, I guess. Catch your kids doing stuff right and call them out on it. Just appreciate it. Don't make a big whole thing about it, but you just express your appreciation. Wow, that was really cool how you actually went in and cleaned up your room on your own, and it's not even Saturday morning. Pretty cool. I'm impressed. Something like that. Just kind of share, you know, just kind of share honest language. So, you know, if we're looking out for that, if we're looking out for what the other devotees are doing right, you know, if anybody watches Bennett and Vishnu John all over the place all day. Don't even want to talk about Jai Gopal, the guy just thinking about the stuff that he does. He's everywhere. Nam Kirtan, can't think about it. Irina, just, you know, here, there, everywhere, stuff going on. Kusha's back there, Nagapatni's got classes going on, and cooking, and sewing for the deities, and so, you know, I mean, all the devotees have so much going on. And somehow or other, because of all that, cubby everywhere, right? Everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's, how many cubbies are there, for goodness sake? And what would happen? The guy's like 72, 73 years old. I thought he was a little younger than that. But I just found out the other day, he's like only a year and a half younger than I am. And, oh, wow. And still, he's just here, there, you know, I mean, taking the trash out, bringing the receptacles in, you know, cleaning this up, cleaning the temple, cleaning the kitchen, cleaning everywhere, just everywhere. So, you know, if we just catch each other doing that and just express our appreciation, we might not be able to find time for the other stuff somehow. And then there was something that's, and the classification, a lot of the classification that Vidura is asking about here in these verses, a lot of these different categories of beings, It largely has to do with qualities. And I was thinking when we were reading the first of today's verses, text 27, see the where did it go? The birds described in the verse as twice born. And I thought, okay, so those of us who think we're hot stuff because we have a little string hanging over one shoulder, and we think of ourselves as a dweecha, some kind of big Brahmin or something like that. Well, the birds are twice born, right? They're born once when the egg is laid, and then they're born again when they hatch. But usually, of course, we don't have, when we count a bird's age, I say this as a former bird person, well, former person with birds, still a bird person. We count their age from date of hatching, not from the date of laying, right? But they're twice born. So when we talk about Vidura's quality as being more than a Brahmana, we're talking about the quality of character and the kinds of behaviors that become natural because of someone's character. And this all comes from, many lives of creating different grooves in our subtle bodies. Okay. So that, it's really about qualities. I just wanted to tell, I didn't think it would be this late, but I do want to tell a couple of things. Oh, shucks. One I needed to read. A couple of things about Srila Prabhupada that I noticed over the years. I'm not one of those people who had bazillions of hours of intimate association with Srila Prabhupada, over the few years of being a disciple. But I did have a few times. Okay, what do I want? Oh, I want Facebook. I've shared this before, but I'm not sure everybody here has necessarily heard it more than 5 or 6 times. When Srila Prabhupada came in August of 1970, when Krishna and I moved into the temple, I think we were like the 7th and 8th devotees in the state of Hawaii. We had Gursundar Govindadasi, Balabhadra Jayashree Turidas Govardhan. And then
us.
Huh?
Then us.
Yeah, and then us. So, but later in the summer, by the time Srila Prabhupada came, we must have had 35 or 40 devotees living in the
At the end
temple.
of the month.
Yeah.
When they got the big house at the end of the month, it was the house was.
Yeah, that place started filling up. I think we were like the first ones in the door, and then people started Kanti, and then Dayanidhi came with Little Bill from the mainland. I mean, once they moved out of the Honeywell house to a little larger house, Mahaparusha came in. The place just filled up with devotees who joined here and devotees who had come from other places. So we just had a few devotees, late winter, early spring. We moved in just before Guru Purnima. And then the place started filling up so that, when I moved in, we had bunk beds with plywood for the brahmacharis to sleep on. And then after a few weeks, we were all mostly sleeping on the floor.
In the yard?
And, well, that was after Siddha Sarupa joined a little later in the year. Then what became the room that we slept on the floor in became a storage room, and we just had to find places wherever we could. So by the end of the summer, later in the summer, it was early August, so it's still not the end of the summer, Srila Prabhupada came just for a day, just stayed overnight. And he gave one talk at the temple on McKinley Street, and the place was overflowing. I mean, we had people in the hall, going down the stairs to the prasadam room, in the prasadam room, on the front porch, down the steps to the front porch, people out in the front yard, people milling around in the backyard because they couldn't get in. We had Neil Abercrombie, who was then a philosophy or political science professor at UH Manoa, brought some students with him, later became US Congressman, Governor of Hawaii, a guy that you might run into at the Poly Highway Longs anytime you're there. Anyway, really, really packed. So Srila Prabhupada, and including Siddha Sarup and his entire following, which was on Oahu, probably about 60, 65 folks. And it was, I mean, just really, the place was just really packed. And so we had kirtan. Srila Prabhupada got on this Vyasa song, which the ladies had finished about 15, 20 minutes beforehand, which was our gauge of how transcendental things were. That it was actually absolutely impossible, but somehow or other Krishna made it happen just right when it needed to happen. And so we had the Vyasa was in a bay, on the shelf in a bay window, opposite where the altar was at the other end of the front room, which was our temple room. So he was sitting up in this bay window on this Vyasa, and we'd rigged up, I told the story about this umbrella before, how I carried it over his head through the airport. In the evening, because we hadn't put one of those umbrellas on the Vyasa yet, one of the brahmacharis was kneeling on the shelf, holding the umbrella over Srila Prabhupada's head as he spoke. Prabhupada spoke for a few minutes, and then he looked up at the umbrella. He looked at the brahmachari. Can I say his name? It's Govardhan. Looked at Govardhan, and he looked at the umbrella again, then he looked back at Govardhan again, and he said, I don't think it will rain in here. But I also wanted to share a quick quotation. Oh shucks, I don't know how to do this stuff. I don't even know how to find my. Oh, here it is. So in 1975, May of 1975, Srila Prabhupada visited the Big Island, again, just for the day. He didn't even stay overnight. He left, came on the first flight in the morning, and left in the afternoon, came back to Honolulu. And the project there was, it was interesting. It was actually quite a gorgeous place, just above where the cane fields were back then, and kind of like at the base of the rainforest on Mauna Kea, up a ways. I don't remember how high up we were, maybe a couple thousand feet. Beautiful view of the ocean. When we bought the place, there was only one structure, two structures on it. One was a one-room hunting shack with a kitchen, and the other was a cistern, a little catchment tank for water for the kitchen. And we built a temple on that from materials salvaged from old plantation houses that we tore down. There was a deal back then. The plantations would, I think it was like a $75 deposit on a lot, and if you completely cleared the lot in 10 days, you'd get your deposit back, plus you had stuff to build with. So our temple was built entirely of this, except for the kitchen and right where the altar was, in the temple room. Built entirely of materials that we had salvaged from these old plantation houses. And the technical word to describe the architecture and the mood was funky. Because it was like old stuff. I mean, they were houses that had to be torn down. And really funky. Prabhupada loved it. So those were his opening remarks. I can't remember when this was in the talk. I'd have to listen to the whole talk again. So he said, so you are very humbly maintaining this temple. It is a great achievement for you. It is acknowledging and celebrating the humble nature of our temple. You're very funkily maintaining this temple. It is a great achievement for you. You will get blessings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The glaring attraction of city, that is Maya. And of course on the Big Island, the city, this was 1975, the city was Hilo. You think Hilo's funky now? I think 40 years ago. When we didn't have all those new, built, we didn't have that Walmart and stuff over on that side of town, or any, it was pretty much downtown Hilo and then homes and stuff. So I was thinking, yeah, the glare of the big city, Hilo, Hawaii, bright lights, big city, The glaring attraction of the city, that is Maya. In the modern age, people are more attracted by the city life. But we should know city life, not for the devotee. Generally, people in general, they like city life. But that is Maya. Maya means which is not fact. We're thinking in this way, we're thinking that this way we shall be happy. But that is not fact. That is called Maya. Maya, it is not. You are thinking in this way that you will be happy, but it is not. That is called Maya. One English poet also said, Cowper, that the city is made by man, but the village is made by God. Prabhupada quoted this a few times, this line from, or referred to, this isn't an exact quotation, but referred to this line from one of William Cowper's poems. Another of Cowper's poems, Society, Friendship, and Love, divinely bestowed upon God, man by God, he also quoted, but not so favorably. When he quoted that one, he would say, that is not a fact. So he said, if you can stick to this village life and be satisfied with whatever you produce, you can produce your necessities, there's no difficulty. If we keep cows, grow food, grains, fruits, vegetables, then we can live very peacefully like that. There's no need of going to the city. That is the plan of God, Krishna. That is the plan of God, Krishna. Krishna personally exhibited. Vrindavan is village. It is not city. We're trying to go to the village of Krishna, Vrindavan. And he was himself, although he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he was taking care of the calves and cows when he was a child. Although Nanda Maharaj was king, village king. So I'm very glad that you are living here. So kindly stick to this place and make an ideal island so that others may see also. Plain living, high thinking. Produce your own food. Keep cows. Milk. If there is food, grain, and milk, there is no necessity. We should go to the forest and take shelter of the lotus feet of Hari. So Vrindavan is also forest. So create Vrindavan. Keep Krishna here, cows here, calves here. Produce your own food. It will become Vrindavan. This is Vrindavan, where there is Krishna, where there are cows, where there is agriculture. That is Vrindavan. So I just wanted to share that. That came up in my Facebook memories when I logged on yesterday, and I just thought, I'm not going to lose this one. So
Beautiful.
best way to not lose it is
Can you post it?
I can post it in the WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Tag Diva.
Jai.
Get him on the page. Okay, it's very late. I'm just going to stop without questions. There will be more meet tomorrow, but we hope it will be more. Touch on a couple of the verses and some Janmashtami stuff. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.